Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 225. This should be a fun one today. I thought we would do something a little more lighthearted, just with everything going on, and our guest, Russ Leach, which we'll get to in a minute. I saw some cool stuff that he was doing on his channel, and then I was like, that'd be a cool thing to talk about, something fun. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to draw comics the Marvel way, the book, and maybe a little bit of our history with Marvel Comics as fans, or as some of us, mostly Russ, has done some work for Marvel. And my dog wants to chime in right now. So let's see. Where was I before you distracted me? Oh, all right. Yeah, so we'll just do the usual. We'll go around. If you don't know who I am, you're on my channel. But if you just maybe discover me maybe through Russ, or just somehow you just found this, I'm Scott Circlin. You can find my work at circworks.com. Also, I guess really the only thing right now I'm really promoting is just my Patreon. There's some stuff up there that's not behind the paywall. For instance, if you are working at home and you want some tips to work from home, I open that up. And then also at any tier right now, I opened up a live stream. I've already done one. I think we're going to do another one next Friday, and it's just open to all patrons, where you can you can ask questions, we can hang out, do whatever. So that's what I'm doing right now. And as you can see, Josh isn't here. He kind of last minute, he had some bad allergies, and he's just wiped out and everything. So I quickly called up Corey and asked if he could come on the show. But unfortunately, Corey has never read the book How to Draw Comics the Marvel way. So we'll see what he can add to the conversation. But how's it going, Corey?
It's good. I think I can add the experience of somebody who should have read it years ago, and because I can draw a lot of stuff, I do not draw people well. So that's Anyway, doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So all right, Russ, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Thanks. We're all locked down in the UK as well, but still working, so that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah. Do you have anything going on that you want to promote or anything? Or
the project I'm mostly involved with at the moment is called Charisma AI. That's CHARISMA, and it's repurposing graphic novels from Europe into into stories that effectively are underpinned by an AI. And the AI talks to you through the story, and you become part of the story. Okay. So it's my job to be the art director on that, and also the curator and illustrator. So I have to sometimes create new characters within the style of the project that's already been done in the graphic novel, but I also have to repurpose the art so it works on a tablet format. But also add in different aspects to make it more exciting as well visually. So it's a tablet comic without being comicsology. It's drawing you in and making it a little bit more personal.
Oh, that's
what's the AI functionality of that?
Oh, sorry, hold on. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I've got no AI. It underpins the story, so it recognizes the way that you interact with characters. So it isn't just like a branching story. It actually works on your responses and your emotive characteristics. So it talks back to you. I've been caught out a few times where it said things to me that I just did not expect. So I'm not part of the technology. I'm just the art end of it. But it's an incredible technology. They already work with other companies like BBC and Sky Broadcasting and what have you. But this is for the consumer end. They wanted something that they could package out so that other people could enjoy the interaction with their AI. And they came to me through various routes, as these things do. And so they asked me to jump on. So that's basically, for the last 6 months, taken up most of my time, to be perfectly honest.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
it's a great project. It really is. I think when people talk about the evolution of comics, I think it might be, because I'm not a lover of digital comics, because I find it's, even with the Comixology, where you can slip from one panel to another, I find it very clunky. I like a comic in my hand. So that's never going to go away for me. Having physical comics is never going to go away. But this is more direct, and it's using that physical medium, or it's using the medium of comic books, and it's twisting it and making it just that much more interactive. So give it a go. Charisma.ai.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to check that out. That sounds really cool. So I was I was checking out Russ's YouTube channel, and he's doing an interesting new series where he's taking. I got somewhere. I got mine too.
It's always here. It's ever present.
Yeah, me too. It's always around. So you're taking, and you're kind of going through how to draw comics the Marvel way, but you're adding more like modern examples as you're going through it. And I just thought that was a really cool idea. I did a YouTube video a while back on how to draw comics the Marvel way. Actually, it's not hard to find. It's actually up there. If you just search how to draw comics the Marvel way, it's probably on the first page. But it was basically my take. Is it a good book, or is it just Marvel propaganda? And I think it's a little bit of both.
It's a good video. Go watch it.
A lot of Stan Lee to it. So, yeah. I think that's part of the charm of it. So, I mean, I'm a big fan of the book and everything. But so, why don't you tell us a little bit about the idea behind kind of this video series that you started, and maybe you can explain a little better than I did.
Right. I very simply, it comes from a deep love of the book.
Yeah.
But also a deep love of Bronze Age comics.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of nostalgia involved in that, because obviously as a kid that was where I was at. I thoroughly agree with you on it's sort of half propaganda, half art book. But I don't see that as a problem, like yourself, because I think comics should be exciting and they should be a bit cheesy. And the reason that there was such a big boom in the 90s and comics became valuable in some way was because they had been pulp. They had been weekly books that you threw in the bin when you'd finished. The idea of collecting them, it just wasn't there. It was about the serialization. It was about the fact that you enjoyed the stories. And I think along the way, that's kind of been lost. And Draw the Marvel Way was kind of like an embodiment of how to do that. But also within its pages are just some of the most direct and clever ways of teaching people how to draw in a certain way.
Yeah, hold on. Can I stop you real quick? So when you said Draw the Marvel Way, you're talking about how to draw comics the Marvel Way?
Yeah. I'm talking about the original one. I'm talking about this one, how to draw comics.
We'll get into that. We'll get into the stuff that you've done too. So
yeah,
I just want to clarify.
This one, this is the original. This is the best. Right. And I do have other books up on the shelf, and I do look at them. There's some great books out there, but this just speaks to my love of Bronze Age. It speaks to my deep and sincere love of the art of John Buscema.
Yeah.
And the fact that Stan Lee, it seems these days you always have to sort of explain in some ways that Stan Lee was not perfect. No, he wasn't. And he might have made some dodgy decisions along the way. And we all know what a genius people like Ditko and especially Kirby were.
Right.
But what Stan did do was embody the comics industry.
Right.
And he made you feel like you were part of a family, talking to a much larger subject. But he made you feel like you were part of a family. And so he draws you in. I don't know if anybody also gets the opportunity to see him and John Buscema do the video, which is on YouTube as well.
Oh,
it's hysterical, absolutely hysterical.
Like totally opposite. Like Stan Lee's just hammering it up.
Stan,
just like,
yeah,
okay, Stan,
he's completely hammering it, and John's having none of it. But so it's just a fantastic book. So the concept for me was I wanted to do something regular for a little while on the channel, and I do deeply, deeply love the book. And I thought, well, why not just go through each chapter? It isn't a read through. The concept is go out and buy the book.
Yeah.
Buy the book. At the very least, download from the education site, which is where I got it from, the PDF. But go and buy the book. It's dead cheap. You should always have it. If you're interested in comics, no matter what your style, you should always have a copy of it. That's my personal opinion.
We'll get forward to get a copy before the end of this show.
So the idea was that I could run through it, and again, like I say, it's not a read through; it's just flicking through. But because I've got the PDF, I can show it up on the screen, and I can also do some of the examples, maybe draw along with it, and show some of my work and how I think this book has directly affected the way that I work. So it's kind of like sharing. It's not a tutorial. It's also not a direct read through. It's just sharing my thoughts about the book, the way it's affected my work, and hopefully by other people seeing my examples, they can see the worth in the book, and it might even help out if people are looking for tips or whatever. So that's it. That's the concept, really.
Yeah, and it's great. So definitely go to Russ's channel. I'm pretty sure I either left a link to that, or I can't remember the link if it was to your YouTube channel or to your website, but there's a link in the description. But definitely check out Russ. It's Comic Book Black Belt on YouTube. And yeah, so I'm anxious to see more. So, but you have had experience working with Marvel Comics, and sort of like almost like a modern version of how to draw comics the Marvel way. Unfortunately, we don't get it in the U.S., or we didn't get it in the U.S. So, do you have a copy of it?
Yeah, I've got a copy somewhere here. Excuse me.
Yeah, no problem.
I've got a few. Oh, okay. What have I got here? So I've got a few copies here. Here's one. So this was a bi-weekly, a fortnightly book that Shet put together with Marvel for the UK market, and I think some European countries as well, but I'm not 100% sure. And the idea being to sort of cash in, as it were, on the popularity of the MCU, which is a sensible thing to do, which maybe some people didn't do, who should have done. And obviously the fact that so many people love to draw. It's typically got 2 lessons in it, 2 main lessons or 2 tutorials, and a tips and tricks page, and then an inspiration, like an artist portfolio, so that you can look at other people's art who's actually been in the industry. So Mike Collins, who used to draw a lot for Marvel, would do the first one. So there's a cover of one of them. It's a bit shiny there. It's the cover. He did an Iron Man in this, and I did a Modok in this. So there's
nice.
There's the Modok, and so that would be. It would break it down. It's difficult to see, but it would break it down into blue lines. So that
I'm waiting to see how he's going to look if he ever appears in the MCU.
Yeah, that's going to be fun. Yeah, I just don't. I don't want to think about it.
He'll just be played by Danny DeVito.
Yeah,
no makeup, and it'll
put him in a penguin suit. And then you'll get tips and tricks. So, for instance, in this one, it was about beasts. So we had Dragon Man and Sasquatch, and there's Crystal and Lockjaw. So I would do the tips and tricks section and the second tutorial, and Mike would do the first tutorial. And I did. So
I was just going to ask, how many issues did that run?
That was 100 issues.
Oh, wow, yeah.
So that's about 4 years. So
wow.
Yeah, so it was great. So I've not had the opportunity, and I doubt I ever will, to be brutally honest, of drawing sequential art for Marvel. But I have had 4 years of drawing their their heroes, their IPs, for them and being under their editorial control. So basically, I technically call myself a Marvel artist.
Yeah,
I think that's not unreasonable.
No, and I know some people would probably rather have the gig of not having to draw the sequential art.
Yeah.
I know that's a sweet gig for a lot of people, I think.
It was good fun. It was good fun. I enjoyed it, and it was lovely to draw so many characters that I knew and loved. Also, they kind of let me go with style, as it were. So I think they obviously liked the fact that I drew in a certain way, which is sort of Bronze Age inspired. I wouldn't say it was thorough, completely Bronze Age. I've obviously got a modern twist on it, but and I couldn't hold a candle to those guys either. That's the other thing. I mean, their art is just stellar, but it's got that kind of feel to it, so it kind of worked. And I suppose anybody with any sense would also look at it and see that it was a sort of an homage to the original book as well, because of the way that it worked. In the earlier issues, we had similar stuff like How to Draw the Comics the Marvel Way did, where you had basic elements, three-dimensional objects, and figure drawing, and perspective, all that kind of stuff. But obviously stretched out a bit more because we were over 100 issues.
Is there any plans, or have they collected that?
Oh, I'd love to see it collected.
Yeah.
I would love to see it.
It seems like a missed opportunity if they don't.
We'll see. Yeah, I mean, it would be great to see that in a big book, and see the tutorials in there. But
and the royalties.
I don't get any royalties.
No.
No,
that sounds like the comic book industry to me.
Yeah.
That's how to do business the Marvel way. That's a different book. It's not published publicly.
Comes with a free baseball bat. It's quite.
So I don't know. Do you want to get? I'm just kind of curious. Maybe we could talk about our history, maybe a little bit of our history with the book. Like when we discovered it, or for Corey, maybe do you have any familiarity with it? Is it I'm just kind of curious. Do you remember did you have the book as a kid, Russ?
No, I got it in. I'm sure I got my first copy, because this isn't my first copy, in the 1990s. Actually.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's when I got it.
That's probably similar to me then, because so I guess my history is, I was always aware of the book, but as a kid I didn't have it. I had this. This is the Marvel Comics Tryout book.
Oh wow!
Are you familiar with this?
Yeah, I know of it. Yeah.
So it's so dogged and torn, and there's pages drawn in it, but it's basically, this is actual comic book size pages, and then it's got a little bit of a lesson. It doesn't really go too much into how to draw, but it talks about all the tools and the techniques, and it talks about lettering. It shows coloring. It shows all this stuff, but then it's got you can practice inking. It's got blue lines where you can submit inks if you want. It has blank comic book pages in it. But yeah, it was when I got this, I mean, it was really cool. But This was the only thing I had. I mean, I knew about How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, but I never really had it. But this was sort of, that's what I had in lieu of that. But then, so when I went to art school, the library had a copy of How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. So I just went and I bootlegged the whole thing. I Xeroxed the whole book, put it in the binder, and I kind of wish I still had it. Once I eventually did get the book, I eventually got rid of it. But I kind of wish I still had it, because it's almost like that was my copy for a long time. In some ways, it was nice because it was in the 3-ring binder. I could lay it flat and flip through it and keep it open like that. So it was kind of cool. But that was sort of that, plus also Comics and Sequential Art by Will Eisner. I got both of those from the library, and I bootlegged them both. But yeah, so So I guess none of us had it as a kid. So that's a little surprising that we kind of find it. I guess you and I both kind of found it in the 90s. So,
Yeah.
But I don't know were you aware of this book, Corey, as a kid, or?
As a kid, I was really poor, so we didn't buy a lot of anything.
Okay.
I think I probably, once I got a job in high school, was kind of when I started buying books. But I wasn't close to a comic book store, so the nearest comic book store was like 30 miles away, which at 14 is like an insurmountable distance.
Right.
So once I got a car, then I was able to get into stuff, but it was kind of expensive to do a 60-mile trip for books. So I think I first came across it probably in early 2000s. And I hadn't seen the book, but I've seen like images from the book come up, like in like little tutorials of a page or whatever. And so I think the one thing I remember about it is I'll switch over is if you're doing something like drawing the leg or whatever, instead of drawing the leg, the only thing I remember from this book is just kind of like scribble until you get like a decent leg shape out of it. That's all. I don't even know if that's from the right book or not, but that's kind of my memory of that situation is I know I've seen pages of it online, but I've never actually seen it. So
yeah. So I mean, they talk a lot about a lot of the stuff. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I talk about in the series that I'm doing is sort of recapping some of the stuff in there as far as drawing with, cylinders and spheres and cubes and things like that. But yeah, I mean, it's not a huge book. I mean, so I'm going to ask the question, Russ, why do you think the book has kind of stood the test of time and everything? Is it because Stan Lee? Is it because it's Marvel as just a tool to learn? What do you think? Why do you think? Because there's been so many drawing books. What do you think it is about how to draw comics the Marvel way?
I think, like John Buscema himself, it's concise.
Yeah.
After the boom of the 90s and the art that went on, which was very bombastic and high detail, and again, don't get me wrong, people like Jim Lee, I think are an amazing artist, amazing talent. But what John did, and he's known as the Michelangelo of comics, isn't he? What John did with his art was give the impression of huge amounts of detail, but actually he was very economic with his lines, and it worked, and it portrayed energy and emotion and depth, and that's what's going into this book. And it's kind of like that's what's at the core of comics, is depth, is fooling the eye into ignoring what's going on in a panel and following the story, if you like. I just did a video about chapter 3, which is about perspective, and one of the points I made was one of the best panel examples was a very simple panel with a character in the foreground walking away from you, a few characters in the background standing around, and in behind the whole thing was a street scene, and it was very low key. And the reason the panel worked was because you didn't notice the perspective and you didn't notice the background, because it was believable. It didn't have to be a perfect portrayal of life, because that's not what comics are. They're an interpretation. That's why they're an art form. They're an interpretation. But it was right. It was correct. And it meant that your eye was fooled enough that you followed that story. And I think that's what John, and I think that's what Stan Lee brought to comics as well. It's that concise nature of storytelling. And with this book, it's a concise way of telling you, look, this is the way you can, this is how to draw, and this is how to draw the Marvel way, basically.
Right.
I think something else coming to this book, I think if you come to it when you first come to it, when you early on, it's definitely teaching you, and when you come to it later on, it's testing you, and that's why it has this kind of depth to it that a lot of other books don't have. That doesn't mean to say that other books aren't skillful in teaching you in their tutorials and the information they display. There's just something right about this book, in my personal opinion, and it really sort of encompasses that Bronze Age perspective of storytelling, that concise way of doing artwork and telling a story within a comic book, and it nails it for me. And I think that's why it stands the test of time, even though styles change. I mean, you look at a Marvel comic book today, and it does look very, very different to a Marvel comic book from 30 years ago or 40 years ago. But people still come back to this book, and it's because it's about concise storytelling. It stands the test of time because of that.
Yeah, and I like I like what you're saying about it being concise, because I mean, you know, and they explain it in the book. I mean, perspective is not easy, and the chapter on perspective isn't that big, but they give you enough information so you can understand it, and then you kind of have to go from there. And they say that too. I mean, and that's one of the things, like in the series that I'm doing. You know, I can't, because I'm doing, you know, basically an episode on each different topic, and it's not just drawing; it's basically everything. But even the episodes that are drawing, I think that one, the penciling, I did split up into two episodes. But you know, you can't teach how to draw in 2 episodes, but you can give the basics, and then hopefully you can go from there. So that's, I think, it just, and it's not, it's I mean, Stan Lee, he's hamming it up, you know, great art by John Buscema, but it's like you said, it's straight to the point. It's not, you know, it's not heady or anything like that. It's easy to, the entry level is easy to jump into. And like you said, even if you're a seasoned professional, going back and looking at it, you're still going to get something out of it, because it's the fundamentals are all right there.
Just that image there.
Yeah.
If you're a pro, if you're doing this a lot, that image, that just you just look at that kind of art and you just go, oh, okay, I'll give it a go. I'm doing my best. So, something else I keep a lot of around me. I've got, obviously everybody does this, but I keep I sort of rotate them on my desk, is stuff like this.
Oh, okay.
Which is a Buscema Sinnott run. Sinnott did so much artwork, and you just
it's black and white. Nice.
Yeah, yeah. And what's great about it is you can see that. I mean, you just look at those pages and go, "Oh wow, look how full they are," and then you go and look at the art and you realise just how economical John and Joe are with their lines, and it's an absolute joy to every time I go and look at that book. Every time I look at it, I'm just I'm stunned at how lovely it is. And I have a whole run of Fantastic Four with Sinnott on the inks, with lots of different artists on it actually, and he brings a real look to the whole run. But I've got lots of other stuff up there, and you know, it's worth flicking through. It's this thing with a lot of artists, a lot of comic book artists starting out, and I did it. I'm sure everybody else does it. And it's the thing that you've got to get over, is that don't copy other artists. Okay, use them as inspiration, but do not copy them. 2 reasons. First, find your own style, because if you look like everyone else, okay, you're not going to stand out, and so there's less chance of you finding the gig that you want. Obviously, if you look like other people, you can fill in. You have house styles, but they don't last forever. whereas your style, you can stick with it. At the very least, find your style, even if you sort of divert afterwards in order to get work. Just make sure you have your style, because once you have that, you can move from that. You're comfortable with it. And the other far more important reason not to copy other artists is that you'll get it wrong. For instance, a great thing about this book is the figure drawing. You have to go out and do life drawing at some point. If it's not all the time, at least at some point you have to do that. You have to look at lots of reference, and don't just copy that reference. Don't draw from the reference. Understand how anatomy works, and then once you understand how it works, then you can do silly things. That you can stretch it, you can add weight and all kinds of stuff to it. I saw something where John Buscema was using a figure skater, a speed skater, in order to show a character throwing something. So the speed skater, I don't know if you've seen speed skating, but they're very low to the ground. They're putting their arms in front, and he'd used that image to inspire him to create a very high energy pose for a character that was throwing some kind of energy ball or whatever. And so you go out there and you get inspiration and you get reference, but don't copy other artists directly, because inevitably you'll fall into a trap whereby you're copying their anatomy, and their anatomy may well know exactly what they're doing, but they've stretched it for the comic or their style or whatever for that particular panel. They might have played with it, and you're then not getting it from the original source. So make sure you understand things like anatomy and then apply your style. And of course, I'm heavily influenced by people like Buscema and Sennett and Starlin and all those guys from that period of time. And I went through my phase of copying. I did that. But I realized, and I had to go away and make sure that I did other things correctly. For instance, like perspective and anatomy and all that kind of stuff. I had done a portion of that because I'd taken technical engineering classes, drawing classes early on in my education. And also I went to design college and art school. But I was actually told there by the tutor that I'd never make it as an illustrator. So maybe that was a really good thing.
I think it seems like everyone's told that same story.
Was there just a rash of really horrible teachers 20, 30 years ago? Because like everybody had a teacher that was like, you suck, you're never going to make it. It's like, what? Who are these teachers and why are they talking to kids and 20-year-olds? Like, it's so confusing to me.
I was actually pretty lucky. When I started, I just started, after high school, I just started taking all the community college classes for art. And I didn't know the difference between fine art and graphic design and all that stuff. And I mean, I was kind of more into, commercial art and graphic design. And the nearest college to me was more of a fine art class, which you need to learn that. I mean, obviously the life drawing, all that stuff I learned, but it got into more, then it was getting into more like still lifes and stuff. And I was in these still life classes and things like that, like drawing fruit and all that kind of stuff. And one of the instructors there just basically said, because I was showing him, somehow I ended up showing him some of the stuff in my portfolio. And there's a lot of like logo designs and like comic book logos and all that kind of stuff. And he looked at it and he said, you know what? He says, it sounds like you're more interested in graphic design. And I didn't know the difference. I thought it's all the same thing, whatever. And he said, you probably should transfer it over to this other school. So that guy, and it wasn't like, get out of here, we don't want you here type of thing. It was just, no, he was trying to be helpful. He saw that I was doing something else. So, he recommended another school. So I went there, and that program, they actually had like comic book classes and all that stuff. So I was pretty lucky, but it was I think there's always, not necessarily in college, but I had those type of things where you'd have, teachers tell you that. I was always the one drawing on the back of all my papers and stuff, and they said, don't do that. You're never going to get anywhere doing that. Drawing. Oh well.
No, I come from a time before then. The idea of having any kind of comic book class would have been laughed at when I was at college. I took a pre-degree course, so it was a foundation course in art. So I did fashion design, graphic design, illustration. It was the illustration teacher that told me to sling my hook. But I also had life classes with another illustrator, and actually he was very encouraging.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the life classes. And I know it's difficult to get any life classes when you're busy working. But what I tend to do is I tend to study people. I tend to people watch.
Yeah.
So who was it down here? Somebody said something. Emotion is more important than perspective, from Timothy. Yeah, you're right. It absolutely is. Especially in we're talking about telling stories in comic books. It is. But I think having that all-round understanding of how the world works, how to build a scene, it can underpin that emotion. It can underpin that story, because if you do decide to put backgrounds into your panels, because obviously not every panel requires a background. You can fill your page too much. That's an arguable statement, but I think that's true. But if you are going to put it in there, make sure it's right, and then it won't deter from the emotive aspect of the panel. So yeah, I mean, it's just important, I think, to study people and not don't be creepy about it.
Right.
But do study the world around you as much as you can when you get the opportunity.
Yeah, I need to do. I started before we're kind of in the stay-at-home, shelter-in-place era. I mean, I was going out and they had these drink and draws where they had a clothes model, and then you just go every month. They would have one, and you go and you draw for an hour or two. So I was doing that, but I think part of the thing about drawing people sort of just standing around or walking by or whatever, you got to be quick about it, because it's not like a model where they're just posed for a length of time. You've got to do these real quick sketches, and it helps you with gesture and getting things done fast and everything like that. So yeah, I mean, hopefully when this is all over, we'll get a chance to go do some more of that. But I definitely agree. That's something we should all try to do a little more of.
I always struggle with that. I'm not fast. If there's one of the biggest problems with the way that I do art in general is it's laborious. I feel like I'm pulling teeth. And you always compare, your outtakes to everybody else's demo reel, but so many other people make it look so effortless. And I know that there's effort, and I know that there's been struggle and work to get to the point where it might seem effortless. But the idea of sitting in a park and drawing anyone that is moving, to me, is just that's beyond me.
That's not something I do. When I talk about observing, I'm just talking about observing. I have, obviously, like I say, I have taken life classes, and I do draw people that I know occasionally for a life class. But it's just that observation of the world around you, I think, is really important. It's amazing, actually, how other people respond to your art. I was with John Higgins. There you go, name dropping of oh God, Watchmen fame.
Oh yeah,
and he and his girlfriend were at a convention, and we were chatting, and he was talking. I was talking about drawing live. So bit sitting there and doing commissions and people looking at it over your shoulder, and he was doing a demo where he stood up and did a painting for everybody, and he said he was scared stiff of it. It's like he didn't like it at all. And I thought, wow, this is John Higgins, and he said, no. He says, I'll never sort of get used to it. And his girlfriend kind of said to us, look, it's magic. It's not everybody can do this, and so the people that can't do it often look at the people who can do it and say it's magic. And I saw this. So don't stress yourselves, kind of thing. And I saw this great meme where it was just like these stick figures. It was a very simple meme, so I could understand it. And somebody had made this massive cake. Okay, and it was fabulous, and the guy was going, wow, look at that. And then somebody else came along and they made this tiny cupcake, and they were looking at the big cake going, oh no, look at that cake, that's fantastic. And they both walked away, and somebody else came up and looked at both of them and went, yay, cake. And it's like they didn't care what it was. And that's the great thing about art, isn't it? It's because it's how you present. It's a very personal thing, and there's always something to be seen in it. So yeah, that whole thing about I do exactly the same thing. I kind of look at my work and I look at other people's work. Oh no, but that's the curse of the artist, isn't it? You're always your own worst critic or best critic, maybe. But what is, I can't remember the name of his girlfriend. Sorry, John. Not that he's probably watching at all. But. The point being is it's like, don't be too hard on yourself. Don't be too harsh on yourself. It's just get out there and do it, because you're always going to have an audience.
I was just going to say, I feel like if ever I stopped feeling that way about my work, I would probably lose the desire to improve it.
Exactly. Yeah.
So while that anybody who is getting into art, especially illustration, should become very comfortable with being uncomfortable. Like you've got to get to the point where you understand that you are going to be dissatisfied with what you're making, and until you die. And then after that, it doesn't matter. That's just because the alternative to that is that you stagnate, or you don't improve, or you become unaware of what you're missing or lacking or whatever. And so discomfort and those feelings of sometimes insecurity, but I don't think that has to go. That's not part and parcel with it. But at least dissatisfaction with what you're producing is just part of it. I just think that's just kind of like par for the course.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. When you were talking about observation, that's something that I struggle with, to be honest, because I've got ADHD or something like that, where just my mind is racing a mile a minute. And because I try to do, I'm out, I go out, I jog every day, and, I'll go through the park, and usually when I get to the park, I slow down and I just walk, and, and I'm looking around, I'm observing the trees and I see how this works and everything. And then my mind will go somewhere else. And before you know it, I'm halfway down, and so it's so hard for me to do that. So because you were saying, Russ, that you'll observe, but you typically don't like sketch stuff down. Because everyone's different, but do you have can you kind of log that away in your brain and kind of recall that when you get up to the page and everything?
Yeah, obviously not all of it, but definitely some of it. So, obviously I stare at my wife quite a lot.
Yeah.
She caught me looking at her the other day, and I was just looking at the little bit in between her nose and her lips, and I was just studying the way that her face worked, basically.
Yeah.
And of course, it wasn't creepy because it was my wife.
Right.
So that was okay. But yeah, effectively, what I think probably what happens is I will have a certain thing in my mind. So I'll be freaking out about drawing noses, or freaking out about drawing eyes, or forearms or something. So that will be what's in my head currently. So I kind of remember it, and then when I go back to draw next, I'll focus on getting that right, and then I'll move on to something else. So it's not like I have a complete memory map of everything I'm seeing. I'll pick things and I'll kind of go look at them, and then adjust my work and then move on.
So what takeaways do you have from from How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way? What if you have you basically read the book back and front, and do you apply every single thing that you've learned, or are there certain things you pick and choose from that, or what is the biggest thing that you took away from the book that you still will use every time you draw, say, a figure or anything really?
I think probably it's probably the section on, where we go, making the figure more dramatic.
That's where we come into the Marvel Way. I was going to say the same thing, where they've got this is a person standing straight, but that's not the Marvel way to do it. The Marvel way to do it, and it's just a little more, you push it a little bit. So I think that's kind of my big takeaway too.
I can't remember off the top of my head. The knack of drawing the figure in perspective. No, not that one. It's this one, isn't it? It's got to be this one because it's the longest one. Let's draw the figure. I think that might be it. Let's draw the figure. But it's this part is dynamite. You can just imagine Stan saying, "This part is dynamite." So let's not waste a second looking at you through the top of his glasses. Oh no, the name of the game is Action. That's it, chapter 6. And I think that's a great example with Dr. Doom, actually. I think that's the one I always remember. Can't find it, actually, and this is not good video, but it's in there. Go take a look. And it's the difference between him just sort of standing, with his fists, and then his arms raised, and the body's arched, the back is bent, and you can see there's real rage in just a stance, and that's what that is what John Buscema was so damn good at, is getting that emotion, weight, gravity, energy, and posture into his work, and doing it in, like I say, in such a concise way that it just displayed so well in the comic book page. So it's maybe if somebody else had been drawing this, maybe this book wouldn't be the same thing for me. I don't know, but certainly his work is a true inspiration.
So were you? So John Buscema is your favorite artist, I take it.
Yeah.
So when were you looking at his stuff as a kid? Did you find his stuff later, or so you were familiar with him before you even discovered the How to Draw Comics the Marvel?
Yeah, I was familiar with him from the perspective of I kind of knew because I was so young. The first book I was given was Stalker. Run on DC, and my mum gave me that, and I remember my dad getting me an Iron Fist when I was a kid as well. There's a joke in there, and then the first book that I bought myself was Captain Britain, which was a Marvel UK product, and within the pages of Captain Britain Weekly were the Fantastic Four reruns that I showed you earlier, with I think started off with Kirby and Sinnott, and then went to Buscema and Sinnott, and also Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. by Steranko, and then another run. Is it Tom Palmer on Avengers as well? And so all those things thrown in, and then eventually. I think sort of towards issue 12, 13, around there, kind of off the top of my head, John Buscema actually took over the main pencils for Captain Britain as well. So it was this Bronze Age overload in just one book, and it effectively that shaped the way that I wanted to see comics, the way that I wanted to draw comics myself. I did see a lot of other stuff at the time, obviously. So I saw a lot of Spider-Man, and there was also I really loved the Micronauts. I don't know if you remember that. There were toys at the time, and the art on that. I don't know who did the art on that, but it was fabulous. I loved that. I remember reproducing a page of Micronauts at the exact size when I was a kid.
I have a Micronaut comic, and the cover. I've got a few old comic book covers where you can see the indentation of back then. I must have had a lot heavier hand than I do now. Pretty light-handed now, but back then you could see where I was tracing the covers and but I dug those Micronauts comics too. That was like right around the time. Also, ROM was a thing.
Yeah, ROM. Well, that would have been Sal, wouldn't it? Sal Buscema did a lot of ROM, and again, his work. I just think that John was the superior artist, but that's not to take away what Sal was producing.
Right.
He, in fact, in some ways, Sal's work is more Marvel than John's, if you see what I mean, especially from the 80s. Mm-hmm. It kind of embodied that sort of sharp look. But John's was the shaper. John shaped the industry, I think. And he was from an artistic perspective. And to have followed someone like Kirby, I didn't appreciate, and I find this is a very common thing with artists. I didn't appreciate Kirby when I was younger.
Oh yes,
I looked at it and went, "What the hell's that?"
Yeah.
And it's only with maturity that I was able to look at it and go, "Oh my God, look at the wonder! Just fabulous." And it comes with that appreciation of different types of artwork, of different styles, and like I say, a maturity. And he is genius. There's no other word for the man. He was a genius. And for Buscema to follow someone like that and find his own way, I think was very impressive. So yeah, it's that art that does it for me.
Yeah, man, it's all good stuff. So we talked about the book. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention on the book? Because I was thinking maybe even segue into not just how to draw comics the Marvel way, the book, but just the Marvel method, which gets away from just not just the drawing, but also the storytelling or the writing as well. But
I've used both methods. Weirdly, my own books, I've broken them down into panels, but I think that's something to do with being an artist and writing your own book, because you're kind of thinking, although writers obviously think visually because they have to for the job, I think as an artist, you're even more planning the page out. So you can kind of go to that panel depth. You can go down and micro manage it to a panel and not feel like you're being restricted because you've kind of come up with it, if you see what I mean. Mm-hmm. I've done a range. I've worked on a range of different script approaches. I worked with a guy called Tim Quinn, who actually did the documentary on Stan Lee and used to be an editor over at Marvel UK and in Marvel US. And he's given me several scripts that I've worked with, and they've ranged in. Sometimes he'll go the full Stan Lee method, the Marvel method of just like, this happens on the page, break it down, do what you want. And then he'll sort of maybe sometimes he'll break it down into panels, but loosely. So sort of a halfway house. And I had that with the editor of Doctor Who. He wrote a few stories for Doctor Who, and he was very light on a light touch as far as the scripting was concerned. He kind of broke it down into panels, but basically said, do what you think works best on the page to tell the story. And then I've had other writers that have been very, very strict as far as their approach to the script is concerned. But I have to say, every writer I've worked with, however detailed they've been as far as their description in the panels, they've always been very open to me changing them and doing what's best for the story. So I think it's a range of approaches. I enjoy, as long as I'm given a little bit of freedom, I pretty much enjoy any approach. I think if a writer comes and tells you exactly what angle you're supposed to be doing everything at, then it becomes too restrictive. These many panels, it must be this, enter stage left. There are obviously some cues that you need to be aware of three-dimensionally and environmentally, and also to tell the story. But if you become too restricted, then it takes all the joy out of it. So it's definitely a combination.
Yeah, because most of my work is all self-published, other than if it was for client work. But I don't think I've ever worked in the Marvel method. And for anyone that's not familiar, basically the Marvel method is a very rough outline. Say Stan Lee would come up with a rough outline, or maybe even just a sentence like, I want these two characters fighting on a water tower somewhere. And then they hand it over to Jack Kirby. Jack would go in and he'd basically tell the story with pictures. And then Stan Lee would come back in and write all the dialogue. And that's one of the reasons why, I think we need to give Jack Kirby a little more of the writing credit as well. But that's a whole other issue. But anyway, yeah. So that's sort of the Marvel method, which I like the idea, and it's something that I would like to do sometime. But it's a little more difficult, I think, maybe when you're the writer and the artist. But I don't know. I guess not. I could see just coming up with, I want this to happen, and then just writing it all out.
Yeah.
And going,
I think that kind of approach works best when you're doing episodic content.
Yeah.
So you get an understanding you get the writer and the artist. They become a team. They know what needs to be done, and if it's running from one episode to the next, you start to get into a rhythm, and because of that rhythm and that understanding, it becomes easier for the writer to just go, okay, I want this and this to happen, and then it kind of works. It becomes a conveyor belt, not in a bad way, but obviously it becomes a production set that works really well. I think if you're doing it for a graphic novel, one-off, or a graphic novel, or a single issue, not so easy, especially if you're changing teams all the time. So I think it comes down to environment as well, and the particular type of project you're working on as to how that approach best works. Obviously, there's always outliers. There's just an opinion, but I think that's probably how it works.
Yeah. So to your knowledge, has there ever been any kind of follow-up to How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, or has there been other books that go into sort of that Marvel method? Because I've heard them talk about it, but I don't know that anyone from Marvel has actually put that in book form or anything.
No, I don't think there's been any specific follow-up. There is another Stan Lee one. I think I've got it actually, but I've barely flicked through it, to be honest. I bought it thinking, okay, yeah, but no. I have this one, and that's it.
Book, or is it?
Sorry?
Is it a process book, or is it
a process book?
As far as having to do with creating comics rather than just
yeah,
and just a bio or something like that.
Yeah. Oh no, it is. Yeah. It's a how-to book. Yeah.
Okay.
But it's just not. I think it's thicker actually. That's a great thing about it. I was saying earlier. It's so concise. It's so easy to use. That's what makes it so great. But you just look at the cover and the way that Thor is sitting on the side of the board, and the way the other characters are leaning in, and it's so simple. You look at the lines. Just look at the lines. There's not that much there, but it's so well done. The form and emotion. It's great. It's great.
Yeah, and it's still. That's what I recommend most. If I have to give one recommendation to a young person that wants, or not not necessarily young, but somebody who wants to get into drawing comics, that's it. I mean, that's the starting point. I mean,
yeah, it's not a gospel. It's just a great.
I'm sure Stan Lee would argue with that, but
yeah, it's just a great springboard. It puts you in the right direction for so many things, and then once you've gone in that direction, to come back and use it on a sort of a regular basis, and it like I say, it can test you, because you look at some of the things in there and you go, how did he do that? You know, like that, just that Captain America that I showed earlier on. There's just something to it. There is something about it, and that's what the best comic artists are. There's something about them, something special. Yeah. And I saw somebody in the chat talking about Mike Manola. Again, somebody I didn't appreciate when I was younger. When he first came out, and I agree with him. I think he's a fabulous artist. He's genius level.
Mike Manola was a little different because I was a fan of his early on, before he kind of discovered the style that he's known for with the heavy blacks and everything. Right. The first comic book that I started collecting, not the first comic I bought, but when, I would just buy random issues and read them. But the first one that I got, and I got sucked into, and I'm like, oh, I want to continue reading this, was Alpha Flight. Back then, John Byrne was doing it. And then a young Mike Mignola took over. And I really liked his style, but it's very different than, it's sort of, I don't know how to explain it. It was almost the opposite of what he eventually became. It was very round and like soft kind of. It was if you've ever seen some of his early work, but I was a fan of that stuff. So when he kind of changed his style, I was like, I don't know if I like it. But now it's like, it's just,
I think that's an example of what we were saying earlier about he knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
And then he chose a style.
Right.
Exactly. So he went through that whole process of where do I go? How do I draw? And then he came up with something that to the uninformed or uninitiated or uninterested would see it as a simpler style, that it was not as good. I probably would have agreed with you to 100%. You and young me would have agreed 100%. What the hell is that? But then after a while, you do start to appreciate just the form and the beauty and the simplicity of what he does. And it's fabulous. And it's, like I say, it's much like Kirby, although simplicity isn't something you would apply to Kirby. But again, his lines, he had economy of line as well. It worked, and it worked because the style was so strong. And Mike Mignola, if he'd have carried on drawing the way he was, where a lot of people might have thought it was better, would he have got the renown that he currently has?
I don't think so. I just, it was, to me, it was different. I could recognize his early stuff. I mean, it was definitely a departure from what I had seen with the John Byrne stuff, and I liked the way he represented a lot of those characters in that book. So it was almost, for me, it was like, oh man, I went from one cool artist to another, and it was almost a little bit of improvement. It was just different. It was fresh and everything. But then when he started doing what he's known for now, like you said, to me, it was almost like, oh, he's just trying to take shortcuts here. He doesn't want to put time on it and everything. But no, there's a lot of consideration and a lot of thought that goes into the way he spotted his blacks, and his just the use of shadow and everything that he did. And now it's just like, it's I do every once in a while we'll go back to his old stuff and like, I still kind of like this stuff, but I don't think he wouldn't have been what he is now. No. I mean, Hellboy definitely wouldn't have looked the same. I mean, he's got that look. It's almost hard for another artist to kind of do an interpretation of Hellboy. I mean, I've seen other interpretations and they look cool, but it's just, it's so that his style is so attached to Hellboy. It's hard.
It's hard to imagine, I suppose, Remitter and Spider-Man maybe, but it's hard to imagine a character that's so connected to the style that they were drawn in. It really is, that other than Hellboy. It's an amazing thing. He's a fantastic artist, an incredible creator, a real talent. There's no doubt about that. But I think that trying to find that style, trying to find yourself. I think Corey was talking about it earlier. It's so important, and it will mean that you can stand out. I saw someone in the chat talking about drawing like Jim Lee. I remember trying to draw like Jim Lee as well.
Everyone in the 90s.
In fact, while I was drawing in that style, that was where I was accepted by Marvel in 1995. I'd done an X-Men submission, and the new talent manager at the time was a guy called Louis Lewandowski, and he said that you're great. I'm going to pass you around the editors, and nothing really happened for me. I think at the time they went for chapter 11. Is it chapter 11?
Yeah.
And being over here, it was all snail mail. Because I know other people had obviously got in, but it just didn't work out for me. Then I went off and had a career doing other things. I was an art director and what have you. So it never happened for me. But obviously, I was attempting to draw in that way, and when I came back to the illustration in 2010, I thought, well, I'll just pick up where I left off. And I realized what I'd been doing to myself, that as much as I loved Jim Lee's work, it wasn't a natural way for me to produce my own work. And I can't remember who it was that said it. And may well be this natural.
Control that was talking about. That was the Mike Manola comment.
Right. But I'm not saying that's not the case for other people. That may well be more than natural for them to draw that way. But for me personally, it was like, oh right, okay, I'm trying to be something I'm not, and it's difficult to look around at all those tasty morsels around you and look at all that fabulous work and go, oh, maybe I should be doing it like that. Especially when someone like Sean Gordon Murphy, is it? When he turns up and you look at his work and you go, oh, it's genius. But why? The reason is the same reason why you look at Kirby, why you look at Buscema, why you look at Mike Manola, because they stand out.
Right.
Nobody looks like Murphy.
Yeah.
He stands out. He stands out miles, head and shoulders above everyone else.
I've got some of his stuff on my wall behind me, actually.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And so the temptation is to go, oh, maybe I could pop some of that in my, maybe I could try and attempt to do so. No, because there's no way you're ever going to do it as well as Murphy. So find your own way. But unfortunately, that really does take focus, and you have to hurt yourself, emotionally, artistically to do it. You have to stunt yourself in certain ways and say, no, don't do that. Be true to yourself. Find that style. It's okay to be inspired and to add little bits and pieces in. We all do. I've done it, but do try and find your own way, because also that will make you happier. You'll be able to look at your work and go, yeah, that's me. And okay, it's not Jim Lee, it's not Mike Manola, it's not John Buscema, but it's me. And you can be true to yourself, and that's really important. It sounds very wishy-washy because obviously it's a business, but it is true, because it's part of your natural process of drawing, of producing, of creating, of telling a story in a comic book environment. And if you're not doing it naturally, if you're trying too hard because you want to be something else or want to be like someone else, then it's going to take you longer. It's never going to be as pure, and it's probably not going to net you as much as far as a business is concerned, because you're always giving too much effort into not being what your natural state is, if you see what I mean. So, for instance, I sometimes talk about myself. I used to program for a living. I was an art director. I started my own business, and then I was a programmer as well, and I was a UI developer. I was never very good at programming. It was really hard. It was a really, really hard thing to do, and I had to keep up with it. And it was one of the reasons I just walked away from it. It was too much. I'd go back to drawing. And I sort of, the analogy is it's much like being a footballer, like a soccer player over here. Footballers they're natural talents. It's like I train in karate. Okay, I work really hard, but I can't kick a ball like a footballer. I can't do what they do. I work hard at what I do, but I could never be a footballer. There's a natural talent. There's a natural bent towards being a footballer. And what they do is they add skill sets to make themselves better at what they do. And I think it's much like being an artist, especially an illustrator. What you do is you have this bent towards being an illustrator, else you wouldn't be it. Okay. And what you do is you add on to that. You add on your skill sets. But it's very much a core of what you are. So if you're staying true to yourself, you can kind of go out there and do it. And that's what I didn't do when I was programming. I know lots of people who love programming dearly, and it's almost like they're just talking. It's just it's another language. It just comes out. It's quite a creative process, actually. Yeah. But it's hard work, and if it's not you at the core, it becomes even harder. So it's that being true to yourself, being true to your style, being true to the way that you develop things, and not trying to be something else. And it will mean that it comes to you easier. It comes to you quicker, and it also means you can make more money out of it.
Yeah,
the process is that much quicker. So
yeah. It's well, I'm glad you kind of clarified as far as building onto that set, because I think certain people have an aptitude for whatever it is, drawing or whatever, but it's not that alone. It's not like somebody were talking about, somebody saying it was magic. It's not magic. You've got to put in work. And if you were to say a footballer, just, maybe they're, a little more athletic or whatever, but it's not that. It can't be that alone. You've got to practice. And I think people realize that. It seems like they realize that more with sports. I mean, it's always like, when you think of practice, you think of, when you're in school and you had to, go out or Little League, you got to practice, you got to go practice, got to practice. But for whatever reason with art, we don't think of, that word doesn't get thrown around as much. It's almost like, even doctors, they call what they do a practice, or lawyers, because they constantly have to work at it. It's not, you can't just, oh, I'm a doctor now. I don't have to study anymore. I don't have to brush up on new things. No. And so it's the same thing with art. You've got to constantly be adding to that skill set. And I think people need, and it's going to be, some of it will come easier to other people. Some of it's going to be harder, but if you love it enough, if you really want it, then you're going to put in the time and you're going to get better. But yeah. So
certainly, you talk about the 10,000 hour rule. Is it? Once you've done something for 10,000 hours, you're effectively proficient at it. Right. That's pretty much the way that I saw my channel. Why I call myself a comic book black belt. Is that when I first got my black belt in karate, that was not the end of the road. That was that was the start. What had happened was, in karate, up until your black belt, the karate forms you. So you mold your body, your reflexes, whatever it is, to working in a particular set of rules within the syllabus. Mm-hmm. And then once you become a black belt and you start learning other techniques, you start learning how to express the techniques that you've learned in different ways, and you move up through the grades. So I'm a 3rd dan black belt at the moment. But the whole point is that it isn't really till you hit the black belt, so you really start learning and testing your own abilities. And I think it's the same with drawing. You've got to go through those basics. You've got to get to that point where you understand all the basics and how it works. And then when you draw comics, you're stretching those basics. You're expressing yourself. You're pushing the boundaries, because it's interpretational. So that practice is really, really important. I've been very fortunate to be working in one form or another since 2010 now, and I've been able to draw every day. And I know we all criticize ourselves harshly. We look back on our own work and cringe, but I can really see the difference by being able to draw every day. And I've really seen my work change in a substantial way. So that really is key to it. Just keep doing it. Keep drawing.
Yeah. There's no doubt about it. I talk about that all the time. I've talked about so much in the series that I'm working on now. So it's hopefully, I think a lot of people are just impatient, and it's just like, we were talking about. I've been doing this week where I was talking about perspective, and it's so much. I mean, one of the videos I put up was just basically me doing just a speed drawing of a whole scene, because I thought it would be good if people could see how it comes together. It starts off very simple. It's just boxes. Once you've got your grid laid out, it's just boxes. But it can't just stay. You've got to add to it. You've got to add more detail, and you've got to make more interesting shapes. If you're doing, like, say, a skyline or something like that. But it's just adding and adding and adding. Otherwise, if you just like, this is going to take too long, I don't want to do it. I mean, you got to put in the time. And going way back to what you were talking about before, and I've talked about this before. And you don't need to have backgrounds on every page. I mean, once you've established, you've created a shot. Once people know where they are, you can just put a little hint of something or nothing at all. And a lot of times, especially if it's like, you've got close up. You've got that close up. Once you add the word balloons, you're not going to see much else in that panel anyway. So yeah, but you definitely have to let people know where they are in the scene and everything like that. And so, you've got to learn perspective, whether you like it or not, and it's that, and the figure, they're both, I might argue that the figure is even harder, but people like that. They tend to spend more time, I think, on the figure than they do on backgrounds and stuff, because most people, they want to draw heroes and stuff. So
I can't remember who it was I was listening to. I am absolutely terrible at names. I've only got so much room in my head, and when something goes in, something else goes out. But I do remember him quoting. He was talking about drawing Hulk for the first time, and it was his first gig. I can't remember who it was, and he said he was so excited about drawing Hulk, and the first part of the book was in a library. He said, so I got to draw books really well, and lamps and stuff like that. And it was then that I realized that, it really is important to be able to draw everything. You don't have to draw every background. You don't have to draw all the details to every theme. And like you were saying, and I mentioned earlier, and sometimes you don't want to. It's a definite artistic choice not to do it, because it's just overload. It's just too much. And it takes away from the story. Takes away from the sequential art. But when you do it, you need to be able to do it properly. So, or at least be able to convince people. So,
well, one of the things I think along those lines that is really helpful for people to understand is that what we're doing is, and this is not a pipe thing, right? It's not a photograph. It's not a play. It's not a recreation. It's an illusion. We're alluding to the idea of something. Basically, what we're trying to do is we are trying to trigger in people's minds an image of a scene, that plays out. And so, you can do things that will allude to that and will give the illusion of it. And then other times you can do things that people always say, oh, it took me out of the story, or whatever. What happened is that the illusion was broken. Their connection to their imagination hit a road bump or a blip. And so, those type of things are really interesting, because my natural inclination is to make it realistic, get it right, do all this stuff. But there are definitely times, probably more often than not, where you need to serve the illusion, which is going to make the perspective wrong. You need to serve the illusion, which is going to mean that you don't draw every detail of the background. You need to serve the illusion, which means that I'm not going to go in and turn my pencil on the side and, try to render out all the different variations in the value of someone's face. I just need to look like a face and know what is emoting, so that then the illusion can play, and that person that is experiencing that can imagine what's going on. And it's interesting, if you think back to your childhood, when you read books, and people always ask, oh yeah, I went back, and they're like, oh, did it hold up? It's an interesting question. Did it hold up? Because what they're actually asking is, I think, is, we're all stupid as kids, and so as an adult, does that story hold up? That's not actually what's happening, though. What's actually happening is that we had an experience. Like I brought my experiences to that book. I brought my experiences to that book, and the illusion that was created in my imagination was mixing with my interpretation of the work, and that's what I experienced. I didn't actually experience the book. I experienced what the book triggered, and then 20 years later, 30 years later, I come back to the same thing. I'm a different person than I was when I was 14, or when I was 6, or when I was 25, or whatever. And so my experience with it is different, and it may or may not trigger something, but it will not trigger the same thing. And so it's an interesting concept that when you, especially in comics and animation and, and that type of thing, where things are very much not realistic, something that gets too granular can pull you out of your imagination. And so, I like that.
Yeah, absolutely nailed it. Yeah. It's my gut feeling is to make everything as close to the real as possible. But I came to the realization long ago that either and or I'm just not good enough to do that. And also it bores the hell out of me. So if I could, I would do pencils, and I would love to team up with someone who's a fabulous inker, like you could trust Joe Sinnott. Do you know what I mean? And you could just say, there it is. And I would love to do that. All I ever wanted to do was be in the bullpen. But that doesn't exist anymore, and it's never going to exist again. So I have to realize that I've got to ink my own work, and it's going to be boring. But
I've heard some tales that it didn't totally exist.
No, never existed. No, no, Stan did a really good job on that. But yeah, my gut is just go, it must be right, and you've got to pull yourself back. Much like I was saying about style, you've got to pull yourself back and say this is a representational thing. This is, as you were saying, it's creating an emotion. It's creating a response. It's not a recreation of existence, of reality, and that's exactly the point of comics, is to pull you into that story and make you feel. It's not about it's not a 3D environment. It's not virtual reality. It's an experience. I remember reading something that threw me, because it's the only time this has ever happened, is I read Lord of the Rings when I was about 12, and then I read it again 18, and then I watched the film when it came out. And I remember at the time, the first film, a lot of people were kind of like, well, it's a bit boring at the start, isn't it? Like, well, it was a very descriptive book, and I was amazed. I sat in the cinema with my mouth open most of the time, because I couldn't believe how close it was to my mind's eye view of what I'd read so many years previous. And it may not happen for everybody, but it did happen for me. So there's obviously something to be had with the way that you connect with your reader and what you get to them. But you're right. Everything is a unique experience for everyone. It's like you say, they're not experiencing the book; they're experiencing their interpretation of the book. So
yeah, and so going back to what Corey was talking about as far as things holding up, one thing that definitely does hold up, I would say, is this book, How to Draw Comics and Marvel. That's what we've been talking about tonight. So I don't know. I mean, I think we're about ready to wrap it up. But is there anything else you wanted to add? Anything that we didn't touch on? Anything else about the book, or anything Marvel Comics, anything like that?
No, just
pretty much.
It's fab.
yeah. Just it's a big recommend. We'll get Corey to get a copy and check it out.
There you go.
I've got a stack about 1.5 feet high of figure drawing books, so I'll add it to the stack.
Well, it's more than just figure drawing. It's definitely, obviously it's specific to comics, and it's it's just that dynamic element and just how to take things to the next level. And it's, I mean,
I got a whole bunch of Hogarth and other bits and pieces, but this is out on its own. It's a different thing. Whole different beast.
Hogarth's a little more complicated to get through and everything compared to this. I mean, I think it's perfect for entry level or experts or any level really.
It speaks to the dullard in me.
Well, I think we can all say that because I think if you've read it, you probably loved it. So anyway, so yeah, well, let's see. So Corey, where can everyone find you?
You can find my stuff. Where is it? Right here. You can find my stuff at coreykerr.com. And I've been getting ready to do this animation, and so I'm doing some stuff on Instagram and YouTube, and so you can kind of check those out. Those are all there. Just go to the website and then you click on. I can't remember what the link is, but it's something like "Find Me Online" or something like that. That's what I'm doing. So I'm not sure when because I'm still building a bunch of stuff, but I'll be doing a call to action for any artists that want to be involved in this animation and have some work that you've done kind of featured. That'll be coming down the pipe soon. So if anybody's interested in that, follow along on whatever social media channel you prefer.
All right. And what about you, Russ? Where can everyone find you? And I neglected to type in your thing on the banners, but your link is in the description of the video. So, but go ahead and tell everyone.
Yeah, I'm Comic Book Black Belt on YouTube, but you can find me at russleach.com or comicbookblackbelt.com. I have a book in production. That's onlydeathcansavus.com. So you sign up for the email subscription list there. That would be great. Thank you very much. Also, the current project I'm on is charisma.ai. Go over there. You can find out a bit more about that. And my personal recommendation is the Sherlock Holmes and the Vampires of London. That's I've really enjoyed producing that. It's got some smart visuals in it that I was able to add to. And the original artist is a fantastic artist. So that's something
we can actually check out now. That's not something that you're just working on. That's
out there. It's live. Charisma.ai. It's out there.
Yeah, we put a link to that. I'm definitely going to check that out because that sounds really cool. All right. And so, definitely thanks for coming on, Russ. I appreciate it. I know you had to wake up really early to do this show, so we always appreciate it when you're here. So
thank you.
And I just thought it would be a fun topic, something to talk about, and it was fun. As far as me, you can find me at circworks.com. You can also go to my Patreon right now. Like I said, I'm doing for all patrons, I've opened up the quarantine live stream. We did one last week. Corey was on it, had a couple of other people on there. We'll probably be doing another one next Friday, I think. So, and all you have to do is join at the $2 level, and you can hang out with us and talk, and similar to what we're doing here. So, so that's that. Also, this show that we do right here, the Artcasters, we usually do it every single week, typically on a Thursday. It can change. It may be a different time or whatever. But if you want to know exactly when we are going to go live, the best way to do that is sign up for our mailing list. There's also a link in the description for that. We don't spam you or anything like that. Usually about 30 minutes ahead of time, we'll just send out a link so you can find us, because YouTube's not always the best at letting people know about that stuff. So you can do that. Also, I wanted to thank the chat, because there was a lot of stuff going on in the chat today, a lot of great comments, and I know we didn't get to pull all of them on screen and address all of them, but there was some really good stuff on there. So yeah, thanks you guys for chiming in, and we will see you guys next week. Later.
Cheers.